Hi everyone, and thanks for watching this presentation about conversational interfaces, what it is probably the buzzword of the moment. I originally created this deck as an internal training for my department team at AKQA London, where I work, and where around 22, 23 UX designers share our passion for user experience design, whatever that means nowadays. So the main idea behind this talk was, okay, here you have a summary of all those books and articles you didn't have time to read and all the conferences you couldn't attend, summarized for you in less than 1 hour. So I chose books like Best Interface is No Interface by Golden Krishna, Don't Make Me Tap, The Conversational Interface by Michael McTeer, and many other good books and articles on this topic. So I thought that after having spent so many hours summarizing them, it was a nice idea releasing this for you all too. So, before I start, and just in case you don't know me yet, when I'm not stalking my workmates with a camera, I mainly work driving the user experience of one of our clients, Virgin Atlantic Airlines. My educational background is computer science and engineering, and before I started full-time on UX just around 4 years ago, I worked another 5, 6 years as mobile developer. Okay, enough about why I think next 25 minutes are going to be absolutely essential for your careers. Because of this chart. Chatbots. Computer programs designed to simulate conversation with human users, for example, inside Facebook Messengers or Slack. If you're watching this, I assume you know what a chatbot is. But this is not a talk about chatbots, okay? Despite chatbots have a lot to do with this talk. As we can see, suddenly in just a few months, the interest about chatbots has gone through the roof. And if you repeat this search with conversational user interfaces or other related terms, you'll get similar charts. Try it. The thing is, okay, why is this chart like this? Probably because this other chart. What this chart is telling us is that last year, 2015, for the first time in history, users spent more time on messaging apps than in social networking apps, the apps where traditionally they had spent most of their time. And why is this so important? Because we've seen a paradigm shift every decade or so. In the 80s, from the command line to the desktop with all these metaphors about folders and windows. In the 90s, with the web. In the 2000s, with the smartphone and mobile apps. And we might say that last year we had another paradigm shift, even if we didn't notice, messaging apps. And this is important because the user is like a moving target and they have moved. And we should engage them wherever they are. And now they are here, using massively messaging apps. And this is a great opportunity because last few years, engaging users through native apps had become very difficult. Difficult in terms of money, for example, with apps becoming more and more expensive to create and maintain. Let's think, for example, about that romantic idea of two developers in a garage creating the next killer app. That's not true anymore. Just have a look to the top 10 or 20 apps on any store. All of them have been created by big companies. But these apps are increasingly complex in terms of interface too, with more and more screen sizes and interaction design patterns and micro interactions and animations. And that's fine. But if we want to offer a simple service, just one unique feature, or establish a personal relationship with our customers, maybe a chatbot inside Facebook Messenger platform is enough. We don't have to create and maintain a complex interface, and the deployment is much easier as well. Think that deploying an Android app sometimes is like a nightmare, and get your iOS app approved might take even weeks sometimes. We don't have to worry about that with a chatbot, but there's another problem going on here. It is called app fatigue. Most users download 0 apps in a typical month. It's not that the apps aren't usable anymore. More than half smartphone users access apps every single day. But people just don't need that many apps. The apps people already have are normally more than enough. With this problem, specifically, chatbots can be very useful. But again, this is not a talk about chatbots. Chatbots are just part of what we are going to cover today, text-based conversational interfaces. But we are going to talk a bit as well about services like Amazon Alexa, voice-based conversational interfaces, or about personal assistants like Siri, who can get information and orders using voice, but can deliver information using text. So it might be here in the middle of these two. Another interesting question is, okay, why now? Conversational interfaces have been science fiction for a long time, and the users have always been disappointed by them. After a few minutes playing with these interfaces, okay, uh, it was clear that they were not working. So why now again? Because let's call this the renaissance of the artificial intelligence. AI has gone through cycles of euphoria and rejection for decades, but last few years we've seen amazing improvements on this field. Some of them rely on solutions like cloud computing or big data. Because advances in language technologies, speech recognition, text-to-speech, and the more conversations we have with these interfaces, the better they get. The emergence of semantic web, so machines can access this structured content and make sense of it, and improvements on device technologies and connectivity. We have seen these articles about the new iPhone 6s has a computational power of 1,000 times the Apollo 11 computer, blah blah blah. But this is not just a matter of computational power. It's about having GPS, having Wi-Fi, and 4G, and Bluetooth, and accelerometer. So these devices have context for that information. And overall, because the interest of companies like Facebook, Google, Apple, Microsoft, these companies are investing a ridiculous amount of money on these technologies. And that's attracting more and more talented people and more companies as in a feedback loop. So this is like a perfect storm if you think about this. We have a complex scenario full of opportunities, and finally a technology or set of technologies ready to be used. So it's perfect. So after this brief introduction about why suddenly conversational interfaces are so trendy, what's happening on the apps market nowadays, and the problems we are facing there, and why conversational interfaces may play an interesting role here, what else are we going to see today? Okay, I have divided the rest of this presentation into another two more small sections. In the first one, we're not going to talk about conversational interfaces. We're going to talk about a problem we have in the UX field. A big, massive, huge problem. The problem, and how talking about conversational interfaces may be the perfect excuse to start solving it. And in the second section, we're going to dive in a bit more into the relationship between conversational interfaces and user experience, and we'll see some guidelines and useful tips and tricks. I love this quote by Donald Norman, by the way. The real problem with the interface is that it's an interface. Genius. I think that what he was trying to say is that he didn't want to focus on an interface to solve a problem. He wanted to be focused on the problem itself, and every interface normally adds some cognitive load, like a thin complexity layer on top of the problem. Anyway, as I promised, the problem we have right now in the UX field as UX designers, let me put it this way. I have had an iPhone since 2008, and I still struggle typing on a flat screen. Have you gotten used to type on a flat screen? Because I haven't. And for me, I think it's even worse because half of my friends are Spaniards and the other half are English or English speakers. So most of the times I write something on WhatsApp, and by the time I have sent a couple of phrases, I realize that the keyboard was on the wrong language, and what I sent doesn't make any sense thanks to the corrector, and it is like, oh, again. Um, I know this has been partially solved by iOS 10 since I gave this talk, but I still struggle, seriously. For me, sending a message to my mother, for example, most of the times should be as simple as this, like, hey Siri, send a message to mom, I am on my way. My iPhone should say something like, okay, send it to your mom. Or, for example, Alexa, play the White Album by the Beatles, and without any other clue or feedback, just start listening to the music. Or something a little bit more complex, like this. The thing is that there's no reason why most of these experiences can't be delivered at the current stage of technological development. I know that Siri still stings a bit, but we can find quite appropriate use cases where deliver experiences like these ones. The thing is that all the interfaces that have been created so far have had something important going for them. They were all artificial creations, and they were all invented for the purpose of enabling interaction between a human and a machine with a very specific technological context. And it was always the human who had to adapt to that interface, who had to learn a new set of rules. It was never the interface who adapted to the human being. And this is even more important now that we are entering into an era of the Internet of Things. We are going to interact with these objects more and more. It's not just our phone or our laptop. Now we are interacting with our smartwatch, with our thermostat, even with our cars. And every single interaction has a cost. I have to, for example, take my phone from my pocket, I have to unlock it, I have to browse and swipe, and I have to use my eyes, I have to use my hands. There's some cognitive load because of this interface. So in these scenarios, for example, voice is much scalable because its cost is much lower. Nonetheless, our love for the digital interface is out of control. Do you want to meditate? Yeah, there's an app for that. Do you want to lose weight? Yeah, there's an app for that. And as Golden Krishna wrote in Best Interface is No Interface, those 5 words, there's an app for that, in some way might have unintentionally fence some creative limitations on us. Let me put it this way. A few years ago, most automotive brands created their own door opening app. So if I had a smartphone and the appropriate card, I was able to open my car with my smartphone. So just for the sake of demonstration, let's see how these apps work. Let's imagine this is me and I'm walking up to my car. So I have to pull out my smartphone from my pocket and I have to wake up my phone. I have to unlock my phone. I exit last opened app. I exit last opened group. I swipe through millions of icons trying to find the appropriate app. And when I finally find it, I tap the app icon and I wait for the app to load. And I'm still waiting. And then I make a guess, like, this looks like the control to open the door, and then I tap the unlock button, and I slide to confirm that action, because we're talking about opening my car, so this should require like a confirmation for sure. And then I physically open the car door. So, this is me, this is my objective, and everything in between is a digital screen-based interface. This doesn't make sense at all. Couldn't we just use the Bluetooth of my smartphone to send a signal to my car? So if I'm close to my car and I pull the door just opens. Okay, let's see some more examples. This is one of the first patents of a car. It was created like 100 and many years ago. And the guys who created this patent solved a real problem with transportation. And this patent changed the world. So 100 and many years later, how do you make a better car? Yeah? You slap an interface on it. Sorry for this silly example. Let's see another one. This is one of the first patents of a fridge. It was created again like 100 and many years ago. The guys who created this patent solved a real problem having fresh food at home. So again, 100 and many years later, how do you make a better fridge? Yeah, you slap an interface on it. And by the way, is this Evernote? Okay, let's see the last example. How do you make a better trash can? I hope you got this obvious one. Have a guess. Okay, by turning it into a 32,000 trash can, 32,000 pounds trash can, sorry, so you can see if it's raining outside when you are outside standing in the rain. Yeah, genius. So, sorry about these clunky animations as well, but I love that from Keynote. Let's see a real example, a more serious one. Let's try to open the trunk of our car. We might create an app with a button to open the trunk, or we might just add a sensor below the trunk, so if I move my foot with my smartphone or my keys on my pocket, even if I'm using my hands, the trunk opens. Isn't this a better way to solve the problem? Okay, so now look at these job offers. They are real job offers from well-known companies across the world. What's the problem with them? The problem is that two different disciplines, as user experience and user interface design, have been blurred here. And blurring them has played an important role in our approach to create technological experiences. When we hire someone good creating user interfaces, we won't probably get new innovative solutions. We will get more user interfaces, not necessarily better user experiences. And no offense, visual designers. The thing is that somewhere along the way we confused the two. And instead of creating the best solution for the problem, we started solving problems with screens. Because that was sometimes part of our job description. And UX sometimes stopped being about people and started being about rounded rectangles and parallax animations. So we create some mood and inspirational boards and user stories and personas, scenarios, customer experience maps, and then the creativity stops and we start creating wireframes and mockups. And sometimes we do it again and again and again. And no matter the client, the industry, the problem, we start asking questions like, okay, Axure or Sketch, or discussing about the libraries we are going to use to create the interface, and then the burger icon discussion. And that's a disaster. And not because the icon itself, but because talented people discussing just about solving problems with a screen-based interface is a disaster. And I think that's why I'm more than happy to work at AKQA, because I know that useful and elegant solutions are exactly what we've been creating all this time. But the question is, okay, could we have solved any of those problems in the past on a better way without having used an interface? And I really think that that's an interesting question. So, what is UX for conversational interfaces? Well, I don't know yet, but what I do know is what conversational interfaces are for UX. A great opportunity to rethink our approach to solve problems in the future. And I really thought this was important enough to spend 20 minutes with it. So, if the first part of this presentation was against screen-based thinking, the second part is in favor of conversational interfaces. Overall, voice user interfaces as a better approach to solve problems. As we saw with Don Norman's quote, the closer we get to a human natural interface, the easier will be solving problems. Tasks that would require multiple complex steps like browsing, text input, tabs everywhere, now can be achieved with a single voice command. Don't worry anyway if you're a chatbot fan, because many of the tips and tricks we're gonna see can be applied as well to text-based conversational interfaces. Okay, but why voice specifically? Why I think it's better than text? Let's think about this for a second. The average person speaks around 16,000 words a day. If we wanted to achieve that amount of words typing, we had to spend 8 hours in a row without doing anything else, just typing. That's crazy. So the bottom line here is that in terms of pure volume, we deliver and process audio far more than we do through all the other media. But voice also communicates gender, identity, personality, mood, emphasis with minimal effort, eyes-free and hands-free. This is very important when driving, for example, on a passive way and without any specific training, from a 2-3 years old kid to any age. Anyone can use voice. The amount of accessibility problems that this solves is amazing. And okay, what can we do as UX designers in this context? This is the cool thing. The same we do every time we start a project. First of all, research. All our research skills can be used one-to-one into this type of projects. Statistics, interviews, polls, personas, customer experience maps, everything. But it is with personas that we find the first particularity, let's say, because given the fact that voice communicates personality, we should create personas not just for the users of the platform, but for the system, the platform itself. We have to define the voice user interface persona, maintaining consistency in voice and style. You'll see how prompt writing becomes much easier if we have a well-defined persona for the system. Would my persona say, what is your age? Or would it say, how old are you? Would it say, I didn't get that, or I didn't understand that? The answers to these questions are usually obvious once you have defined the persona. The challenge for the UX designer here is to come up with a persona, this is a voice and a personality, that best fit the brand and the company and is most appropriate for the purposes of the interaction. Have you ever thought about creating a persona for a non-human entity? I think it's crazy, isn't it? And later on in the project, the best way to test our persona is the Wizard of Oz test, where a user interacts through a microphone and a speaker with a human, pretending to be the system, probably us again, UX designers. So in some way, we don't have to create a prototype to test the interface. We are the prototype. This is weird. By the way, I hope you have enjoyed this slide because it took me 1 hour of my life I won't get back. And once we have our personas, what do we do next as UX designers? As we saw before, we create scenarios for them, we create storyboards, customer experience map, but let's see 3 dimensions that need to be considered with voice when we create these artifacts regarding with scenarios. For example, the environment. Is it too noisy? If it is, don't use voice because the user won't be able to hear the system and the system will have problems recognizing the voice as well. If the user is in the company of other people, voice might not be the best way to interact. Others might overhear the system or the user, or might be bothered by the noise or something like that. Or what about the content? What is being communicated? If, for example, the information that needs to be communicated by the system to the user is sensitive, like the date of birth, test results, something like that, then unless no one is around and can overhear the interaction voice, probably will not be the appropriate means. And how much is being communicated? I can't imagine some terms and conditions being just like spoken to the user. And what about the persistence? Do we want to maintain traces of the communication once the communication has been carried out? I think it would be better for me to text you my address rather than call you and speak it to you, so you can use that in the future. What about the user state? The properties of the user, for instance. If the user is 90 years old and hard of hearing, or drunk, or already speaking with someone, or does not speak the language well, or is in a hurry and can't spare the time to engage in long conversations. Okay, we've seen some things to take into account about the scenario. What about the channel itself? We have to remember that people can speak a lot faster than they can type. So all the content we can get using voice, go for it. Don't make the user type on a flat screen. Think that they can listen much more slowly than they can read. So if we have explained some kind of, again, terms and conditions, it doesn't look a good idea using voice for that. And they can talk much more quickly than they can listen. For example, my girlfriend. Sorry. The thing is that we might think that designing a voice user interface consists in taking a graphical user interface and simplifying it for use through voice. After all, okay, while only a very small minority of people can claim some talent as graphical artists, the vast majority of us can safely claim to be competent talkers, or at least competent enough to design a simple interaction between a human being and a dumb computer. So, designing a voice user interface might seem, at a gut level, to be easier than designing a graphical user interface, but the opposite is in fact the case. Voice user interface design is a lot harder than graphical user interface design. Okay, anyway, let's move on about the channel. Time linearity. When you are reading text on a web page, for instance, you can easily skip ahead with your eyes to the section that you're interested in. Not so with a voice interface where you must patiently listen to one word before you can hear the one that follows, and so on and so on and so on. So, avoid long prompts. Like, welcome to your new voice interface, blah blah blah. We have to avoid that. Use short meanings around 2, 3 options, it's fine. More than that might be problematic, like select, manage my booking, online check-in, blah blah blah. Put important information first. We already knew this, but it's not a bad idea double checking everything, just in case. Allow interruptions. If we are dictating an email and we leave the app and we go back the following day, the platform should say something like, hey David, yesterday you were creating an email. Do you want me to delete it, send it, continue dictating, something like that. Offer shortcuts. If the user knows exactly where to go, instead of saying, hey, welcome to Virgin online checking, and the user goes straight to online checking. And allow pauses. Let's imagine that I ask Alexa for an address. It doesn't have a screen, so it might say something like, take pen and paper and say continue when ready. So I have time to take pen, paper, my phone, and say, okay, continue. Another one, Uni-directionality. Just as time is a one-way street, speech is a one-way medium. When you hear something, you can't easily go back and listen again. Contrast this to reading a piece of text, where you can readily scan a couple of paragraphs or even pages, back and reread everything, and so offer to repeat. If the user hasn't understood something, like, could you say that again, or what was that again? Offer help. For example, if we can't get an instruction or a command from the user, we might say something like, do you want someone from our sales department to call you? And offer summaries at any point, like, hey, wait a moment, what have I ordered so far? You have ordered like 2 pizzas and 4 beers and blah blah blah. Okay, continue. And perhaps the most frustrating thing about using a voiced interface, the feeling of not knowing where precisely you are in the interaction and what exactly the system expects to do next. Invisibility. On many websites, we have normally on the top right corner something like step 1, step 2, payment, booking confirmation, blah blah blah. We don't have that with a voice interface where the user can quickly feel lost for lack of mental markers, positioning them where they precisely are in the exchange with the system. So, mark the exchange, like online check-in. Please tell me the name of the first passenger. With that online check-in, we solve this problem. Another one, trace the path. For example, London, restaurants. What kind of food would you like today? Chinese, Spanish, Mexican. With that, London restaurants, we have solved the problem again. And use earcones. An earcone or auditory icon is feedback about an operation that just happened. For example, when we send an email on Outlook, this whoosh, or when something went wrong, like error, something like that. Whatever, but silence, because silence might be understood as if something went really, really wrong, or the app has paused, or something like that. So, to summarize, time linearity. This is avoid long prompts, use short menus, put important information first, blah, blah, blah. Uni-directionality, offer to repeat, offer help, offer summaries, and invisibility. Mark the exchange, trace the path, use icons, and perhaps here resides the one fundamental advantage that graphical user interfaces have over voice user interfaces. The feeling that a graphical user has of control over both the medium and the interaction. We don't have that control feeling when using a voice user interface. So take this into account when creating those fantastic customer experience maps. The user is gonna feel an amazing, huge, incredible lack of control over the interface. Okay, and just one last thing, this one related with the user itself when using this channel. It is called anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism, I'm going to read this. Human beings are genetically wired to equate the sound of human speech with the intelligence and sensitivity of a human being. Clifford Nash wrote, the conscious knowledge that speech can have a non-human origin is not enough for the brain to overcome the historically appropriate activation of social relationships by voice. The impulse to react to a computer that is engaging you through speech, the same way one would react to a human counterpart, is much too strong and almost irresistible to suppress. So, what the hell does this mean? Set the expectations. How? Okay, if conversational interfaces are things that we talk to instead of we use, what exactly are we talking to? This metaphor is as fundamental to a successful UX as the notion of a desktop is to the graphical user interface. Is our interface going to talk as if it was a semi-god in a box able to do almost anything like HAL 9000? Or is it going to be something like R2D2, like an extra smart Roomba? This is important. It's an important question to answer because as human beings, we're going to project our feelings to that interface. And that's what UX is about. It's not about drop-down menus and checkboxes, as we saw in the first part of this presentation. UX is about emotions, reactions, feelings, and about how we manage them. So I'm going to leave you with that question today. Thank you very, very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, don't miss books like the ones I commented on the first slide, like Best Interface is No Interface, Don't Make Me Tap, I love that one, The Conversational Interface, A List Apart, blog, Chatbots magazine is amazing as well, and many other good stuff out there. So, thank you again, and see you soon.